So my name is Karine Albert. I am the product owner for the King's Career Accelerator portfolio that we have, including this one on UX design. So I've been working quite closely with our faculty members at the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College London, as well as with our industry experts to develop this program that's has both the academic rigor and the industry is informed by industry to make sure that we have a fantastic program that will equip our learners with the skills they need in UX design. This is the second of a three-part series on exploring careers in UX design. I also have my co-facilitator, Lizzie Janke, here. I'll give Lizzie a minute to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I'm the lead experience designer on this particular CA. I work with Karim to basically, this is where the rubber hits the road, to actually build out the program that launches next month. I'm working very closely with two of our panelists here, Justin and Dennis, to really bring the curriculum and the course map that Karim and Kings have been working very hard on to life for you all. Thanks, Karim.
Fantastic. Okay, so today we're going to be talking to a panel of UX experts who all know what it takes to get into UX, what are the skills you need, and how you can obtain those skills and how you can demonstrate it to industry. You'll see our panel's looking a little bit different with Justin joining alongside Emma and Dennis, but we'll move on to intros in a little while. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions directly in the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote others' questions. If you see a question that resonates with you, upvote those questions. That is how we're going to decide the order in which we answer those questions. So please do engage in both those ways by adding questions and upvoting. Then I'm popping a link to the UX Design Career Accelerator with Kings in the chat, so you can take a look at the brochure and book a call with one of our enrollments advisors to learn more about the program. I'm also excited to note that for those attending today, there's a £500 discount on the program until 1 May. So you can, again, speak to one of our enrollments advisors, book a call with them to learn more. I'm going to ask Emma, Justin, and Dennis to turn on their cameras, and we can start our introductions. I'm going to start with a bit of an icebreaker question. Dennis, I'm going to start with you. So based on what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self? And if you could follow that with a bit of an introduction, that would be fantastic.
The advice I would give to a younger Dennis would be spend more time just talking to people, getting their perspective, getting their advice, or just, learning to see the world through their eyes. Because I think when you're just starting out, that kind of information is really valuable. But a lot of people don't do that, because obviously it means you have to reach out to people, you have to do some work, and then you actually have to meet people. But I think if I would have done that, it would have changed things a lot. I would have had to do a lot less by myself, and a lot of mistakes or a lot of wasted time I could have saved.
Fantastic. And do you want to give us a bit of an intro on Creative Navy and yourself?
Sure. So I'm Dennis Leonard. I'm the CEO at Creative Navy, but also I'm a product architect. It means I actually work on the projects and I try to figure out, how we should build the tools that we're building. We are a UX UI design agency, so that means we focus on this aspect. We're actually one of the first to have ever existed, and nowadays we focus a lot on complex systems or very challenging systems, things like systems to manage satellites on orbit, or medical devices, or software that you use to simulate explosions. So these are all very complex interfaces. And I'm very excited to be here because I'm also very mindful of how our industry is changing, what people need, and just how the profession is evolving. And I think we need a lot more people to join. So that's why I'm here, because hopefully there are a few people here who want to improve the field of UX design.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dennis. And we'll be talking a little bit more about Creative Navy and their role in the program a bit later. Emma, I'm going to throw the same question your way.
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one piece of advice. If I can be cheeky and have a couple, I think the first one that comes to mind is it's okay to pivot. I did a huge career transition at one point, and I really worried about, oh, am I messing up everything I've worked so hard to build? And then I realized actually it was that background, those connections that I built that made me successful ultimately in my career pivot. Coupled with that, I wish I had worked with a career coach earlier on. I didn't realize it was a thing when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I ended up following a path initially that wasn't the best fit for me. So yeah, I think if you have the opportunity to get coaching, it's absolutely life-changing. And I guess to introduce myself, linked to that second piece of advice, I work with 4th Rev as a career coach. So work with the learners on our programs to help them get really clear on actually what are their career goals and how we can support them to get there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we've seen that career coaching piece being really valuable in helping people transition into new careers, which is very much a common theme we see in the digital economy, people pivoting in their careers. So that's fantastic. Justin, I'm going to popcorn your way next.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, I'm Justin. I guess what I would tell my younger self is to just not settle with what's comfortable. I think especially early on in your career, you can get really excited that you're just making money, you have a decent job, but I would just constantly think strategically about what you really want and keep exploring how you can get there. I definitely look back at my younger self, and there's one job in particular, I probably was there twice as long as I should have been. And if I had just kept being persistent about what I really want and what's going to make me happy, I think that would have been really good advice. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I am a UX subject lead at 4th Rev. So I work with other subject experts in UX and the learning designers here at 4th Rev to basically build the course content with stuff that basically will empower people to become great UX designers and to start a career in UX design. So I'm really looking at what skills and knowledge is important there. Prior to joining 4th Rev, I was head of user research and design thinking for British Telecom's B2B business. And throughout my career, I worked as a UX designer, service designer, UX researcher, as well as a product manager. Yeah, talking about career pivots, I had a total career pivot. I went to business school thinking I was going to work in renewable energy, and I just happened to take courses in experience design. So one of the professors designed Euro Disney, which I thought was really cool to learn about experience design, even beyond the screen, and design thinking and service design. And from there is where I really was this is the field I want to work in, and went to an agency after business school instead of some finance job or working in renewable energy. So I definitely had a career pivot.
Fantastic. It's so interesting to see how the pivots, but then also within UX, how many different sort of paths there are to explore. So that's really fantastic to have that background here today as well. Please note that there's a poll that has been launched, just asking a bit about what brings you to this event. There we go. Got a few options there. And we'll keep an eye on that as it develops. Also, just a reminder, questions, to please post them in the Q&A section below your screen, rather than in the chat. It just allows us to keep track of it a bit better. Fantastic. Okay, well, let's see what the poll is saying at the moment. Most of you want to switch into a career in UX design. Fantastic. Some looking just interested in all things UX design. I love that curiosity. Learning a bit more about the Career Accelerator and understanding the role of coaching better. So we'll keep that up for a little bit and see where we land. But it's also just helpful for us to know what brings everyone here and how we should frame our responses as well. So I'm going to kick off with a few questions for our panel. Dennis, if I could start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about your background, you have already shared some, and just how you landed in UX design. It's always so interesting to hear about different paths into the role. I think you're still on mute with us.
Yes, I hope you can hear me now.
We can.
So I was saying my background is actually in cognitive psychology. So it's in many ways that's unusual, or at least when I started, that was completely unusual. But I started by trying to create a product. So I worked with other designers, and I didn't like what they were doing because they were great visually, but the product wasn't making sense to me as a user experience. So I ended up doing a lot by myself. And I thought at that time that those methods I used were better. Of course, they weren't really methods. I was an amateur. But that's really how I discovered the need of better UX design in general in the world at that point in time. So then I just grew into it. I started doing it for myself and for others. And, now here we are. But I think that's actually an interesting way of doing it, or of getting into design, because I suppose a lot of people have experiences with all sorts of digital interfaces and they're thinking this just doesn't make sense. It's not good. Of course, you also have positive experiences nowadays, but if you think about it, there's still so many systems that don't do what they're supposed to do, or they don't work for the user. So I think that's, for me, a sign just how big the need is out there, and it's only going to grow.
100%. That links really nicely with also one of our golden threads throughout the program is UX design in different contexts. The need for UX design isn't just on the typical products that you might associate with UX design, but it's everywhere. So I agree with you. I think the need is great. Justin, if I could ask you the same question, how did you end up in UX design?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously I mentioned earlier about my pivot at graduate school, but it wasn't really that simple. I had these super inspiring classes. We had our end of year project where you worked with a team to basically work on a startup idea. So we were working on the smart mirror development and like prototyping it and testing it with users, and just honestly just got me like super excited about developing products. And I think because I was in business school, I thought, oh, I should go into product management because that's more of a businessy role than UX design. So I went and started as a product manager for a small app that was like a side business of an agency that was providing services to other companies like McDonald's and HSBC. And I felt as a product manager coming out of business school, you don't really have the skill set that you need to be a great product manager. You either don't have expertise in that field that you're working in, or you don't really know, have an expertise in the roles that are part of the team. So like I didn't know UX, I didn't know development really well. And then I found that I was just naturally drawn to UX, particularly for my courses at graduate school, but I just was excited about doing things for the user, learning about the user, trying to create that optimal experience, as Dennis mentioned. I mean, I'd walk into a grocery store and be like, why is all this stuff in the gluten-free aisle in a heavily trafficked area? Because people stop and try to like read the ingredients, or like, why is this app not working? And I was just naturally drawn to that. So I just asked the UX and product leads of the agency if I could switch to UX design, and the rest was history from there, really.
So on the back of that, Justin, you mentioned sort of some overlap between your story and Dennis's in that way of that, I suppose, curiosity or wanting to fix things. And we also spoke about UX designers often coming from a diverse background. So with that in mind, do you think there are certain commonalities or a certain type of person who's drawn to UX or that works well as a UX person? What do you think that those commonalities or traits are?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I am kind of the belief with any job, if it's not nuclear physics or like rocket science, that anyone can do it. Like anyone can do UX that is interested in it and would like to do it. There's not really a huge blocker in terms of time learning. You still need to learn your craft and you need to practice and develop skills, but I think it is possible for anyone. I think there are like a few core traits that like will not just make you a good UX designer, but will actually cause you to like really enjoy doing it. So obviously having empathy for others is a really big one. You're going to be designing things for other people. And so you should enjoy learning about other users and other people and enjoy trying to understand their point of view and build things that meet that. One thing that people might not think of when they think of design or UX design is collaboration and listening and taking on feedback is really huge. You know, when you're designing in UX, you're working as part of a whole product team. So it's a team sport. And then when it comes to your designs, you're not designing for yourself. You're not an artist. This isn't for you or to for like someone to enjoy as their single piece. You need to be okay with taking on board feedback and wanting to like make it good for someone else. And that means like testing with other users and being okay with people being critical of your work. So I think collaborating and taking on feedback is really important. And probably the last skill set that is really crucial is thinking critically and creatively, and problem solving is really big. At the end of the day, you're trying to solve users' problems so they can achieve their goals. That's a big part of UX. So I think with UX, it's more about the soft skills than the hard skills. We can talk later about, we can go a deeper dive into like some of the hard skills that are really crucial to be a great UX designer. But I think for getting into it and being passionate about it, the soft skills are crucial.
I think that's yeah, that, like I said, really highlights the human skills that are required, or you know, stand UX designers in good stead. And I think those are also quite transferable skills, which is great if you are moving into UX, especially, you know, if you have worked in other contexts to have developed those skills in a different way. And it links also nicely with Dennis's advice to his younger self on going out, developing that empathy, speaking to people, remembering that you're designing for others, those sorts of things. Dennis, if I could ask you the same question around traits and perhaps some of the human skills that you think is common to many people to whom UX appeals.
Well, I think Justin summed it up really, really well. So I'll just emphasize some of those points, but maybe also add my perspective. I also think that there are no real blockers, because UX design is a very interesting field. Because it sits in between so many things. So, you know, no matter where you come from, you will bring something that's going to be valuable for the process and for the work. So you might think, well, I have to be an artist who's extremely creative and so on. Well, Justin was right to say, no, you're not an artist. You're designing things for other people. So of course there is creativity involved, but you know, you don't need an extreme amount of creativity because it's not about self-expression. I would also add that you might be thinking, well, I'm a, you know, very analytical thinker. I'm not really what people normally associate with a designer. You know, I don't dress funny and so on. But that's completely okay, because actually UX design is a lot about analyzing and understanding and organizing information in a way that it makes sense, not so much just putting things together in a way that is weird. You know, good UX design is usually not weird. So I would say wherever you come from, you can harness those skills. And I would even say that if you have any kind of prior experience, it's probably going to be helpful, because it just means you have more perspectives that you can rely on to understand the word and people within that word. So this curiosity of trying to figure out things in terms of understanding reality, but also being mindful of the fact that you can never really fully understand it. So you have to enjoy questioning things all the time. If that's you, I think you'll do well in design. And then just having the patience to go through the process. Of course, this is something that you will learn with experience, because at first, no matter what you do, I suppose you'll be very eager to see results, to see something happen. But if you slowly build the patience to wait things out, to really do your research and so on, and things come together. So good traits are curiosity, empathy, but you don't need an infinite amount of empathy, just enough to understand people. You can also be someone who's sort of like an engineer, or similar personality to an engineer, but maybe who doesn't like maths that much, or doesn't like things to be that abstract. I think that also makes you a good UX designer. Also, if you're a very practical person in terms of seeing through, you know, all those abstract ways in which people tend to complicate everything, and then if you're the one who says, well, this doesn't work, let's do it simpler, that again will make you a good UX designer. But ultimately, it's all about learning and growing into the role. That's really all it is.
Right. And then Justin, you briefly mentioned also the hard skill or the technical skills required in UX. What do you think those are, and what advice would you give for someone moving into UX who wanted to attain those skills and showcase it in industry?
Yeah, so I think being able to, I mean, there's quite a few, because there's different domains within UX. If you're talking about UX design specifically in terms of designing wireframes and building prototypes. I think that's an absolutely essential skill. And I think, Dennis talked about patience, and that is a skill where patience is involved. It takes time to get really comfortable with designing a wireframe and building prototype. But that's like essentially your job. If you're a UX designer, it's going to be to create UX designs, which are typically in the form of a wireframe or prototype. So I think that's really important. And to do that well, you need to learn specific things like interaction design principles, cognitive patterns, like how close to put buttons together and how to keep things consistent, and whether it's accessible for people of all ages or disabilities. These are things that are really crucial when it comes to the actual designing, and it takes time to learn that. I think the other big skill is user research. So you can be a user researcher or a UX researcher in your own right, but you can also do it as a UX designer. And the reality at many organizations is there's not resource for a separate UX researcher, or there is, but not every UX designer or product team can use them. So if you have the ability to perform research and understand how to avoid bias and analyze things properly, I think that's a really big skill to learn. Probably the one additional skill I would suggest that is a tangent to UX is if you do have a passion for visual design, UI design is not a critical skill to UX, but it is a supplementary skill that can be particularly useful, particularly if you're interested in working at a startup. Sometimes they're hiring just a product designer who can do both UX and UI, or even in times of financial crisis, some like smaller companies might be like, we need to have someone who can do both. I mean, I think it's best practice to separate both, and that is still what's happening at the majority of companies. But it's an additional tool set, maybe one that you add a few years later in your career, or if you're already a UI designer, you're going to add UX design. I've seen that happen with many UI designers switching to UX. So I'd say that those are probably the key hard skills to learn for the job. I really like Dennis's soft skill though, about like not being afraid to question the way that we're doing things. I think businesses are quick to make assumptions, and even business leaders in the business will do that. And sometimes it takes a researcher or a UX designer to say, well, are we sure that we know this, or are we just assuming that we know this? And not being afraid to step in and recognize whether we know or don't know something is a huge skill to have.
Yeah. And that type of critical thinking is also something we've tried to promote in the program, to have activities and reflection questions and various opportunities for learners to critically engage, not just take things at face value. And then, Dennis, I'd love to hear more from you around if there's anything you would add to Justin's list around hard skills, or how you consider those when hiring UX designers.
Well, a very technical skill in this area is just being able to use software, Figma or any other types of software. But I wouldn't really worry about that, because the software is very user-friendly currently. I mean, it's evolved a lot, so it doesn't take a lot of time to learn how to work with it. But just in case someone thinks that's the thing holding them up from getting into UX design, well, that really shouldn't hold you up. The software is something you don't have to worry about. But what I would also add is that with all of these hard skills, you might think about them, do I have this skill or not? Well, skills aren't really a thing that you have or not. It's a gradient. And of course, in the beginning, you have very little of it, but then you build it and it grows. That's the nice thing with skills. If you just practice them, they grow by themselves. And of course, practice also means you are going to do a lot of things wrong, but that's okay. That's the whole process of learning. That's why we're here. And even I'm continuously learning how to do things better. So there's really no end to it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that growth mindset is great. Emma, I'd love to hear on that segue. I'd love to hear a bit from your side around the skills you've seen in the industry around UX design.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the hard skills, the soft skills. The work I often do with learners is actually, say you're looking to pivot, let's have a look at what you've already got. And it's so easy to be focused on these are all of the things that I need to learn, but each of you will be coming with a unique set of skills. So for example, maybe you've had really good commercial awareness in a role that you have now, and actually as you're transitioning or progressing, in UX, that can be something that really makes you unique, because you know the kind of business impacts of some of this, as you're also understanding what it is that the end user wants from a process. So often I find people overly focus on the technical side of things, and we've talked about this so far, but actually those communication skills, the ability to collaborate with other people, sometimes negotiate, sometimes understand, just how to get people's buy-in on things. They're incredibly important, things that you can learn and things that we cover in the program.
Fantastic. On that, another sort of components of the program is that we have industry partners such as Creative Navy that give input on the approach to the curriculum and all the way through in terms of the learning assets, and then later on also the employer partner for the employer project, which I'll talk about in a bit. Couple that with the project-based learning approach that we take on teaching UX design in a very practical, applied way, such that our learners have a sort of a portfolio at the end of the program. How can it, and I'll start with you, Emma, how can a program like this benefit someone looking to move into UX design?
Yeah, what we consistently see, particularly for people who are making a career pivot, a Career Accelerator with a name like King's just gives you immediate credibility. And the great thing is, as you're going to, say, interviews or even negotiating internal promotions, you don't just have an academic understanding, you actually have that applied experience of, I've learned these things and I've got real work experience of having applied them. So I've found with the learners I've worked with, A, it's been a massive confidence boost. B, they've really stood out in application processes because of what they've been through. And in many ways, it's the equivalent of having real world work experience.
Fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned the confidence boost, because that's a nice segue into my next question, which is around the employer project that we do at the end of the program. So as the final component of the program, learners are placed into groups and assigned a real world organizational problem that they need to solve in groups. Our first employer partner in that regard is Creative Navy, and we're really looking forward to running that project with you. Dennis, if you could maybe talk a bit about, I think, a couple of things, why you chose to partner with King's on the employer project, and what you think learners would benefit from, but also as an employer, what you think an employer would benefit from hiring someone who's been through a project like this.
Well, you know, this element of teaching others how to do this is not something new to us, because obviously we have to grow our team. So it's always been on our mind, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, but then also building a group of people who are a team who can work together and to apply that kind of insight. So I think we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, also in terms of what are good projects for people to start out, because not every project is good for that. And so we want to share some of that experience, because I think it's very valuable. And I've also seen a lot of people get into UX, do the wrong kinds of projects, and that sort of makes it difficult for them, because they learn the wrong kinds of routines, or they develop some preconceptions that are then difficult to unbuild, and that costs you time. And even if you're 20 something, you don't have as much time as you think. Your life will end very soon, so better to make good progress. So that's sort of the motivating factor behind it. The project is a real project. It's an older project, but it's a very good project for people to learn. It means trying to solve challenges that are real, including all those elements that make them difficult to solve. Because if you have, practice projects that are made up are great because they are simple. So they're a good way to start. But I think you can do those on your own, because you can just get them online. But something that is a real project usually comes with a lot of noise and a lot of factors that make it generally challenging to come up with a good user experience. So that's the reality of UX design work, and just having a go at that, even if the solution that you produce isn't great, maybe it's not even good, maybe it's very bad. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you try to solve it, because that's how you learn, right? Just by doing things. And that then becomes useful to an employer, because if you start working with someone who hasn't had that real life experience, obviously they need some time to develop it. That time means a number of projects that are not going to go so well. So as an employer, you just don't want that, right? You want someone who come on board and the next day to deliver some results that make you really happy. And then if you can find someone who has had that experience and who can showcase that, because the other thing as an employer is you make a prediction. You're thinking, well, I think this person is going to perform well, while the others maybe won't. So let's go with this person. But you don't really know. And you can apply all sorts of psychological tests and whatever. They don't really tell you much. They're a very poor predictor. So you have to rely on something. And having a real project to discuss, having that conversation, means you get the chance to discover how that person thinks. And as I said, you might be doing very poorly on this project. And then you can come in and say, look at this rubbish solution I produced. I can explain to you what I learned. And they will say, that's great. Well, you've already learned that. You won't have to learn it on my project. So let's start doing something together. That's why I think reality is a very practical thing to discuss with people. That's why I think a lot of employers like people with experience. I think that's many times it's just a term of saying, just, I would like to be able to have a conversation with you about reality, not about potentials. That's why I think this kind of project is very useful, and that's what we'll be trying to do there.
Thank you, Dennis. We're really looking forward to seeing what comes of it. And like I said, what I alluded to earlier, the confidence boost that also gives learners and going through, like you say, a real problem with all the complexities that come with that. I'm going to hand over to Lizzie for a few more questions before we look at the Q&A.
Thanks, Karin. So something that we have built into this program throughout the program, but we focus a lot on it in course one, are the different roles available within UX and the different contexts in which UX design happens. So I'm going to ask you, Justin, because I think your work with British Telecom in terms of not a private sector, what does a job-ready UXer look like? What do they sound like? What do they do from that perspective? Can you give us some insight there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends. One, I think on the role that they're going for. If they're going to be a UX designer at a large organization and do a very specific UX design role, or if they're thinking about going into user research, or whether they're, there's even tangents like service design, or they want to be a full-on product designer. I think, having done a course for me is shows that they not just have spent time learning the material, but they care enough to invest their time and money in that subject. And so that would give me some trust, especially if it was from a credible source, of course, like King's and Fourth Rev. But yeah, passion and those soft skills that I talked about will be the biggest things. I think hard skills can be taught. For example, on my research team, we had a pretty good onboarding process with materials they read, projects they would start working on, similar to what Dennis mentioned. We kind of have things that they would regularly go through to help build their hard skills, like that they're analyzing correctly or designing correctly. So I would look for motivation and soft skills. If they have a portfolio, it's a massive plus, and you don't often get that with on the opposite ends of the spectrum, super junior people, and then very senior, team leaders often won't have a portfolio either. And that also demonstrates care, how much they care about what they want to do, and motivation. And for anyone that's not done a portfolio before, which could be a number of people that are looking to do the course, do not underestimate the time and motivation it takes to do it. People put it off for years that work in this field, and it can take a long time to build up. So the fact that you're building up on this course and can present it back to someone is like a really big thing. If I was hiring a contractor, I would just ignore them if they didn't have a portfolio. Like I wouldn't, maybe for a senior role, I wouldn't, but if it was like for a contract, I would hire them because I want to see what they've done and know their experience. For someone junior, there's more leeway there. They could talk about it, but I would expect someone to have done some kind of experience, whether it's on their own project or a real life project, something to demonstrate. It's not just their skill, it's their motivation and desire, which basically will show that when they join, they can learn the hard skills. As Dennis mentioned, it's not impossible. So that's what I would look for in a UX designer.
I think that dovetails really nicely with what Dennis was saying about the employer project, and what that can do for someone. And from what we know in the poll, many of you joining us today are looking to switch into UX. So this is very relevant for you all in terms of building up a portfolio. You'll have opportunities within the program itself to do that, to build up assets, to work towards your portfolio, but also as part of the employer project, what you do there, those things can then also go into your portfolio, which is really nice. So Dennis, is there anything, sorry, Justin?
Yeah, I would add one more thing onto that. And I think if you're changing your career and you have previous experience, that's a huge plus, because when you're new and junior, there's a lot of things to learn in the workplace. And, I make an effort not to be ageist and like not hire young people or not hire old people, but there is a benefit to people that have work experience. And even though they might be junior to UX, they've worked with teams, they presented to senior stakeholders, and that's like really valuable. So yeah, that's a big factor to consider as well.
Absolutely. So before I throw to Emma to walk us through career coaching, because I've had a peek at the Q&A and some people are asking about what that's about. Dennis, is there anything you would like to add to that in terms of what a job-ready UXer looks like?
Yeah, well, I can add to this element of what are employers looking for. What does someone look or sound like who we would hire? We don't consider applicants without a portfolio, because the proposition of I want to learn this, can I come and learn it in your company, it's not relevant. We don't have the time to teach people who haven't even had a go. So we want to see that kind of motivation. And Justin is right to say, well, if you've done one thing or two things or three things, a mock project, a real project, whatever it is, that shows that you're already in this and that you're committed to it. The other element is, as I said, you have a basis for a conversation. You can ask people, why did you do this particular way? What were the challenges? It can be more meaningful. If you just ask people abstract questions like, where do you want to be in 5 years? That doesn't predict anything. The other element that we would be looking for is, the ideal candidate would have a combination between that, being self-driven, being able to prove that you've learned a lot or done a lot by yourself, because that shows, again, motivation, but it also shows that you can be independent and figure out strange challenges on your own, because you're going to need that in UX design later on. All the challenges that you will get, you'll have to figure out on your own without someone's help eventually. But the other thing that you would hope for is that the person has had a chance to sort of go through what they need to know in UX design in a systematic manner. I think that's where having followed a course, especially if it's longer than just a month or two, so it has to be something solid, comes in is very useful, because you can prove that. And someone who has been through that kind of course also has a more robust and systematic way of seeing the world and going at things. Otherwise, you never really know where is their blind spot to be expected for a person.
Thanks. And that's something we have really tried to bring into throughout the 3 courses in the program, to really bring the learner through the entire process. So because mindful that many of you may not have been through that entire process. So you get a sense of what that, not just the concepts and what it is, but also what it feels like to go through it. So Emma, as I said, I see a few questions in the Q&A about career coaching. So can you just walk us through career coaching on a CA and what would look like on this CA?
Yeah, happy to. And so career coaching is such an amazing process. There's very few times in life that you get to connect with someone whose only objective is to help you achieve everything that you want to. So it's a really unique relationship. And basically we work together in a really bespoke way. The start of that process is supporting you to get clear on what your goals are. People come with different degrees of clarity. So if you're struggling to get clarity, we will help you with things like strengths identification, understanding your values. If you know that already and know exactly what you want, we'll immediately be into execution of whether it's helping you get promoted, whether it's helping you land your first job in UX. And everyone is on a different timescale with a different background. But the career coaching process is completely bespoke to you. So you'll be assigned a career coach who will work with you in one-on-one sessions. And you'll also get a wealth of support around employability skills and various resources that we'll share with you to help with some of the how-to stuff that you don't necessarily need to cover in a coaching session. So we make sure the coaching sessions are really high impact for you.
Thanks, Emma. I can see we need to start the Q&A soon, as in right now. Just a reminder to please pop your questions into you'll see a Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen, put those there, and please upvote, because we are going to go answering the questions with the most upvotes. So, all right, ready? Let's go. All right, first. Whoa, it's moving in real time. Okay. Is user research part of the UX UI design course? And also, what is the difference between product design and UX? Okay, let's take it one by one. So the first one, I am going to ask Karim to answer. And the second one, Dennis, that will be product design and UX. So Karim, over to you.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about the human skills, including the communication skills, the collaboration skills that UX designers need. So throughout the course, it is woven into not just how do I do this, but how do I do this in collaboration? And with that, how do I do this often in a digital environment? So that is, I wouldn't say it's like a topic that we cover, but rather every part of UX that we think about it through that lens. So again, with a strong emphasis on the human skills necessary, that is very much woven throughout the program. Sorry, I'm speaking to the remote part, but in terms of the UX and UI question, I might field that to one of our experts.
Sorry, just real quick. Sorry, Justin. User research is a part of the course. There's a strong emphasis on it in course 1. And then elements of it come up again in courses 2 and 3 as we move through the product development process. So yes, absolutely, it's a large part of the course. Justin, you were going to say.
That's what I was going to say. Perfect.
Sorry, I was
Dennis,
looking at the wrong question.
It's okay. Dennis, can you just talk us briefly the difference between product design and UX?
I'll try. The thing is, people use these words in all kinds of ways. Well, one way of thinking of product design, or maybe that's the easiest definition, is many times when you say product design, you're thinking about the physical shape of a product. So for example, when you're talking about a phone, it's, you know, the weight, the dimensions, whether it has rounded corners or not. Other people use the word product design when there's a role in a team between a product manager and a UX designer. So in this context, the product designer would think about what should this product even do, and what should the user experience or the user interface accomplish. So they would probably be working on more high-level things like the information architecture, basically how the experience breaks down into a number of steps, or what is the goal for each step. But in reality, you know, they might dip their toe into wireframing those screens. I think UX design is perhaps a little bit easier to define but even this can, you know, user experience can be the most general thing in the world. But usually when you say UX designer, you're thinking about someone who puts together all the details about what the interface will look like. So all the buttons, where they go, what they do, the size of them, and so on. But without the aesthetics, that means without the colors, for example, or without a flashy animation that's there just for fun. So it's really let's say the substance of what you usually associate with design. So everything that is important and not so ephemeral is what a UX designer would do. But chances are you might, be working somewhere and you're going to do both product design and UX design and a number of things. So I suppose it's not a clear-cut distinction.
And I think that happens often. We see that sometimes here, that the distinction, depending on the organization, the setup of the organization, the industry you're in, whatever it may be, that sometimes product management, for example, in UX, there is an overlap, there's gray areas. So I think that's something to keep in mind. It's not always so black and white. The next question, how much can someone attending this course be afforded the opportunity of networking with industry professionals more widely? And what scope is there for networking for employment opportunities? Emma, I'm curious if this is something you can speak to, and maybe you've seen it in the other CAs that you've worked with.
Yeah, and the first thing I'd say is the cohort that you were a part of is such a powerful network in itself right now and in the future. And we've already had people in Career Accelerators get hired by someone else in the Career Accelerator. So never underestimate the power of your immediate network. Networking is one of the most powerful ways to achieve your career goals if you want to get into UX or develop a career in the industry. So actually one of the things your career coach will work with you on is how to come up with a networking strategy that works for you. So some people will love going to events, other people, to make a generalization, may be more comfortable with online networking, the specific strategies we use with LinkedIn, all the things. So it's a big part of the career support that we give you, because still to this day, only a small percentage of roles are actually advertised. So we will support you to create some opportunities through networking.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate that. It's great. Okay, so moving down, Karine, you had started answering the remote work question. If you want to finish answering that, that would be great. And then the second part of this question is about options to specialize in, for example, UX research or UX writing. I can go ahead and answer that in terms of the course. You'll have exposure to both in the course. As I said before, the bulk of user research is addressed or covered in course 1, but it comes up again and again in courses 2 and 3. And UX writing also is a topic within a module, I believe, in course 3. Justin will correct me if I'm wrong. So I wouldn't say necessarily specialize in, but you will be exposed to these things, and that is part of your journey with a career coach. What is it about UX that appeals to you? Yes, there's this generalist UX role, but there you can specialize, and that's something we quite purposely do in the program to get you to reflect on what you are learning about and what is it that appeals to you, and maybe this is something you would want to specialize in, for example. Karine, remote work skills.
I think I pretty much said all I have to say there.
Justin.
I think there's a lot of stuff on user research in the course. You could definitely be comfortable going into user research, just like from my experience as a user researcher, there's enough there to go into a course really comfortably. And then I would say, as you said, Lizzie, with UX writing, there's enough to see if that's an area that you're interested in. But you'll be hard pressed to find a career accelerator on UX writing, I would think, like fully on that. So it's probably the perfect amount of intro.
Okay, I see in the chat we are going to have to move quicker. We've got 4 minutes. This is a lightning round, folks. So, Karine, proportion of time spent independent learning, live sessions, how much career coaching? Can you just give us a quick breakdown of what that looks like?
Breakdown, the course is around 16 hours a week. About 10 to 12 hours of that is dedicated to independent learning, and that's in a variety of different formats. So that's both sort of reading through material, videos, animations, but also a lot of practical work, because UX design is a practical field. So in every module, there's a large component of practical activities that you need to complete. But then also there are also opportunities to share what you've done with your peers and get their feedback and see what others are doing. So that's sort of how the more independent study works. But then there's also 2 live classes per week on a specific topic, usually relating to the practical assignment activity for that week. And there are also a series of masterclasses where we bring in different experts who can speak about their sort of experiences in different contexts on a more specific topic. And then you've also got your time with your student success manager and your coach. I'm going to ask Emma to speak to the number of sessions and how those are typically utilized throughout the program, because it's not necessarily at a regular interval as with the other components.
Yeah, so for career coaching, it's bespoke to what your timeline is. If you're coming in with an urgent need to kind of switch role, get a promotion, then we'll probably get through your sessions quicker than, say, someone who wants to start being active in the market later in the program. But you get an intro session with your career coach, 6 one-on-one sessions, and then we also run kind of skills workshops, and there's on-demand resources as well to support you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. With 1 minute left, I'm going to quickly address the next question. In terms of how many portfolios can you expect? Honestly, I think it really depends on you. So you're going to have activities throughout the program where you will build out assets. So that can be one massive portfolio where you kind of take a case study approach and walk people through it, or you can break it out into different portfolios depending on the nature of what you're applying for. We are going to use Figma in the course, maybe also a bit of Miro, and you don't need any prereqs for those tools. We will have ample opportunities to practice and lots of tutorials, both asynchronously, independent learning, and also in synchronous sessions. Okay. So I think that's it. That's it for the Q&A. And now we are moving on to the end. We have come to the end. Karim, over to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today, and for Emma, Dennis, and Justin for talking about their expertise and their experience. I'd like to ask each of you to close with a top tip for our attendees. And you can interpret that in any which way you'd like. I'll start with you, Emma.
Oh, so many things to say, but if I had to pick one, it would be kind of stay curious, always keep learning. And it's just amazing what happens with your career where you stay connected with that kind of being curious, learning, investing in yourself.
Thanks so much, Emma. Dennis, would you like to share your top tip next?
I would say do stuff. Whether it's this course or something else, just do stuff. Stop thinking about stuff, do stuff.
Love that. Thank you, Dennis. And Justin, what about you?
Well, I definitely would have said stay curious, keep learning. So I'll probably stick with that. Just keep exploring things, keep learning new things, find out what you really like. And then when you do become a UX designer, the doing that Dennis is talking about is going to be so key. Like, don't be afraid to just start designing. It's going to be scary. Just do it. And then as you do it more and more, you'll feel better and more comfortable.
Thanks, Justin. Fantastic. And then, yeah, again, thank you for everyone who joined today. We've got the 3rd event in the 3-part series coming up soon, and we will share those details with everyone who's registered here today. Hope to see you there. And then if you're interested in the program, please book a call with one of our enrollments advisors. And that is really us for now. Thank you very much.